Welcome to the Sad Dad Games podcast, where if the games are sad dad, we're going to talk about it. I'm Shan.
I'm Eric.
Luke.
I'm Tucker.
And today we have a special featured guest.
Hi, I'm Lundy.
Today we're going to be talking about The Last of Us Part 2, from leaving Jackson up until Seattle Day 1, when we find out what Tommy has done and what he's starting to turn into. It is a phenomenal part of the game. I am always transfixed by the game design of this section, and that's why I'm incredibly excited to talk about it. How about everybody else?
I could take it or leave it. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm super excited.
Right. Can I boot people from this call because Eric is out?
I'm being a party pooper. Yeah, I secretly really hate every part of this game, and I'm just here to undermine all of it. No, I'm super excited to talk about this next part. It's a really cool part of the game. I feel like we get a really good introduction into some really fun character arcs, so super stoked to talk about it.
Love to learn more about Tommy. I love to delve into the Dina and Ellie relationship. This is a great chapter in the game.
Yeah, I love this chapter because it introduces a lot of new gameplay mechanics from part 1 to part 2. And there's a little bit more of a survival type of play mechanic with maps, which I love to see.
Right, so in the last episode, we just...
Spoiler alert.
Saw Joel die. We are leaving Jackson and we are intercepted by Maria, and we think that that Tommy has gone out of his way to inform Maria so that you can't escape the town with Dina. But we actually find out that Tommy has left before you, and Maria actually wants you to go after him. And Maria, she thinks her husband's kind of an idiot, and she thinks that you can do something about it.
I mean, I want to back up a little bit here because I think there's a really interesting conversation between Ellie and Tommy right after the fact that we didn't touch on last episode, where they are full-blown, let's go get revenge. You know, there's not a whole lot of mourning of Joel, which I thought was interesting. It's, okay, what are we going to do? How many people do we need to do it to go after these SOBs that killed Joel?
Immediately jump into the revenge planning phase.
Yeah,
no,
so
that's
I
right.
want to ask...
Go for it.
I wanted to ask what do you guys think how does this speak to each of their characters?
I think it's interesting. Everybody goes through their stages of grief, right? And it seems for Ellie and Tommy, maybe it's just because of the amount of loss that they've experienced in their lives or their overall ethos. But I think it's interesting that we don't see a whole lot of grieving, really, and they skip right on to retribution, which, I think we see grieving along the way later in the journey. Certainly, at least we do from Ellie, I think. With all the flashbacks and everything we experience with her, she kind of goes through her stages of grief. But with Tommy in this chapter, we go hot and heavy right out. And I think we skip all of that and we go straight on to how many people do I need to kill to feel better about this?
Hot and heavy, the right term for this.
Hot and heavy, the only term for revenge. Not served cold, served best hot and heavy.
You took the joke from me.
Right, so speaking of which, so we actually walk through Joel's house first before we stumble across Maria. And Emily wanted, we have to give her credit, she wanted me to call out that while we're walking through Joel's house, we see that a mirror is missing, and that this mirror is actually found in Ellie's house. So just attention to detail from the designers and developers there.
Well, and it's just nothing just springs out of nowhere. It's like, well, if Ellie has a mirror in her house, it must have come from somewhere. Let's take have a missing mirror in Joel's house, because if Ellie's got a mirror, obviously she got it from Joel. Just attention to detail is staggering.
Right. What else do we find in Joel's house?
So before we get into Joel's house, I just want to I'm backing up. I am in full reverse.
Let's just start the game over and let Tucker talk about whatever he wants to talk about.
Just let me do it. So in part 1, everybody but me really took their time in Sarah's room. So I felt extra guilty at this part of the game. So I really took my time with Joel's house and the whole sequence walking up to it. I thought it was very interesting. Joel lives on Rancher Street, and Joel in part 1 talks about wanting to be a sheep rancher. I just thought that was kind of a fun little Easter egg detail. And then when you get into his house, a lot of the paintings are kind of old Western cowboy rancher paintings, which was really, really fun. Back to Shan's question, though. One of my favorite sequences is when you find the guitar in the house and playing the one song of just, yeah, it takes a lot of, I can't remember the name of the song because I'm terrible
Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam. They're the ones who wrote this song.
But what's the song?
Yeah,
what song?
It's definitely a song. Yeah.
It's definitely a song that she learns.
But I love just Ellie's facial expressions here, because the lyrics of the song and the tone just hit so much harder now that Joel is gone. Like I got a little bit choked up and a little bit kind of rah, let's go kill these guys, which didn't happen the first time I played through.
Future Days is the name of the song. I couldn't remember it either, so I Googled it real quick. It's Future Days by Pearl Jam.
I thought it was an original when I first played the game.
Womp womp.
Because I don't know Pearl Jam.
Yeah, it's
we are very musically literate people.
The interesting thing about Future Days is I believe, this is one of the things that I'm interested to see when they do season 2 of the show. I believe that song was released after 2003, and since the show is set in 2003, I know that they used it in the most recent trailer, but I'm curious to see if they're going to still use it in the show, if they're going to be like, well, it wasn't released, but Joel went to a Pearl Jam show and they were like, hey, here's a new song, and he just memorized it or something, or if they're just going to find some other way to shoehorn it in, say that Joel wrote it. I don't know, but
here's the twist: in the TV show, it will be an original song. Yeah, just so Shan will have been right retroactively. Yeah,
no,
Joel becomes Eddie Vedder, and the show goes.
That's The Last of Us Part 3.
Guys, Pearl Jam survives the apocalypse. Okay, they survive all the infected, and they release an album
of course
post the fall of the world.
There we go.
So this is what's going to happen. All right, we've seen Zombieland. It's going to be like when they find, oh shoot, I'm spacing his name.
Bill Murray.
What's it? Bill Murray, right? It's going to be like when they
Shan
find
just
Bill
forgot
Murray.
Bill Murray. Oh my goodness.
I was thinking Robin Williams, but I know it wasn't Robin Williams. All right, so it's going to be like when they find Bill Murray. They're going to find them. There's going to be like an epilogue where they go to their house because they want to, look through their house and look through their the musical history that is, their houses and their. You'll have to cut this all out, Emily, because I'm just rambling now.
No, it's really good. We should keep it all in.
But they're going to find
great storytelling.
They're going to find unfinished music, and Joel's going to take that with them, and they're going to learn this music, and that's going to be how it retcons into this universe. Probably
they're going to find like the original tapes, the original recordings, and release them for the first time.
No, I like Luke's idea of all of Pearl Jam surviving the apocalypse, and they just keep releasing new music. Yeah,
still just touring and like acting like nothing's different.
Touring,
right? They can
Nothing can stop Pearl Jam.
That's my favorite.
All right, so we also find in Joel's house that he has taken up wood carving, a very cathartic, peaceful thing for him to. Just like a very zen hobby for him to be taking on. So I think that kind of demonstrates that he's very at peace with, where he's at in his life right now. Doesn't seem to have any compunction with having murdered a bunch of fireflies.
You carve a deer out of some wood and then you feel all better about it. Well, that answered kind of a question that I asked all of us and myself in the last episode is, what do people do, like artistic people and creative people, what do they do in this apocalypse? And I think that it just shows, it gives a little insight to what Jackson is for these people. Jackson has kind of created a bubble where human beings can be human beings again. We see like Ellie has a sketchbook. She's got a painter's easel in her house. Joel has like all these wood carvings, and it's like, and it talks about like a girl that Ellie used to date being a tattoo artist. And so Jackson has created a place where people have their basic needs met, and they can do like create art and be creative and do those things again, which I thought was really interesting answer to a question that I asked in the previous game that I wasn't really expecting to have answered, because I'd forgotten most of what happens in the second game since it's been a long time since I played it. But I thought that was a really cool detail to illustrate how comfortable Jackson is for these people.
I think in the previous episode too, as we were talking about part 1, I was asking the question about, what do you even live for at this point? I mean, if you're just surviving to survive and there's no real quality of life and there's nothing human to hold on to, then what kind of existence are you living? And this peek into Joel's house, like seeing the wood carvings and the paintings, and like you mentioned, Eric, the easel that we see in Ellie's, all of those details give us that hint into Jackson about how people are living real lives again, exploring their humanity. They're not just existing to exist or just surviving to survive. I love everything in Joel's house. One of the things that really, I love the little picture that you find on the fireplace mantle that says "To Joel from Ellie," and it's the hand-drawn sketch that Ellie makes of Joel. I think that's so cute and sweet. You find the soccer photo of Joel and Sarah that's up on display, which I think kind of also gives a big insight into how far Joel has come along in dealing with his past and dealing with his own demons. Because I don't know if 4 years ago Joel, or 10 years ago Joel, would have been comfortable putting a picture of Sarah up anywhere. And now it's up in a prominent place in his place in Jackson, which I find really interesting. There's a lot of detail. One last thing I want to mention about like something I really enjoyed in Joel's house. When you're exploring it as Ellie and you open up the closet and she just grabs his jacket and she smells it. That's such a beautiful detail. I mean, for those of us who've lost people, that instinct to remember their smell and to smell their clothing, that is so human. That's so raw and real and visceral. And I just loved that moment of her grabbing the coat and smelling it, remembering Joel's scent. That's really beautiful.
For Joel as a character, he has just died, and we want to make sure that he's had full closure on all of his character arcs, and having Sarah's picture out demonstrates that he's finally laid those demons to rest. And we don't yet know where he stands with Ellie, and we won't know until the last few minutes of the game. And I think that's the most painful thing, is to get to the end of the game and think that he died with this big question mark of where he stands with Ellie. And I think that was what made it the best edited game story-wise for me, best written.
What was the... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Shan.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't really want to talk about it yet until we get there.
I was just going to say,
powerful conversation.
You had mentioned like the Christopher Nolan-esque storytelling in this game. I agree with you. Like the cutting and the tidbits of backstory you get, but not until after the fact. That does make for some really effective storytelling. I did want to ask a question about Ellie coming into Joel's house. When do you think the last time Ellie was in Joel's house? I mean, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, because we're going to get there, like things that Ellie learns and things we learn about where she's at with Joel and their relationship. But at this point in the game, you don't know that. But when do you think the last time Ellie was in Joel's house was up to this point, knowing how rocky their relationship was at the time?
I couldn't put a date on it, but it would be watching movies together.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it doesn't. I didn't notice anything at Ellie's house that suggested there was a good area to watch movies, and so I always assumed that she went to Joel's house. So I'd have to agree with that. Whenever they were watching their 80s action movies,
or Jurassic Park, maybe,
or Jurassic Park. What a great movie!
That's 90s.
Doesn't make it less of a great movie.
Jurassic Park wouldn't watch it.
Touching on
obtuse.
kind of continuing on a lot of what you guys have said, though, like one of the things that I really appreciate about the subtle storytelling in Joel's house at this point, that helps us set the stage from part 1. Throughout part 1, we kind of learn, like, Joel is a very relatable character, but we also learn that he is not very heroic, right? He's kind of a bad dude. Like, there's the conversation where he mentions that he's been on both sides of those kinds of hunter attacks. He doesn't answer the question, but by doing so, he does. When Ellie asks, if he killed any innocent people, we learn that, his methods of survival, when he meets up with Tommy in the first game in Jackson, and Tommy's kind of telling him, hey, we've got this whole society here. Joel doesn't really seem interested, and Tommy even lets him know, like, the things that we did, I can't sleep at night. And Joel doesn't really even seem fazed by it. We kind of learn in that first game that Joel is at least as much of a monster as the infected are, if not more so. And we see at the beginning of this that he has settled into that life where he is no longer, he's a productive member of society. He's contributing. He's living for more than just himself. And he's got these knickknacks around his house that show that Ellie is such a big part of his life. And we kind of realize that while she wasn't the cure for the cordyceps infection, she was the cure for Joel. And
I like that.
She now is starting to kind of realize, like, he's gone, and, like, she has some guilt and things there. But as we're going to see throughout later in this episode, sort of what the story is doing now is it's asking the question, okay, what happens if we infect Ellie and Tommy with that same disease that Joel had in the first game? What if they get that infection? They're not getting the cordyceps infection, but what made Joel the way that he was now seeps into them. And how do they handle that? How do they progress?
Symbolism. Boom.
Yeah.
I love
what
that
if you,
thought. That was great.
What if you don't heal humanity, but you heal one person for a few years?
Yeah.
Basically the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you pay it forward.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I think it was worth it.
Yeah.
You're still trying to find a way for the number of bullets you pumped into the doctor at the end
into his crotch.
Yeah, I don't think
doesn't know
Lundy,
that episode hasn't been released yet.
I don't think that episode has aired yet, but Shan look out for it. Shan has lots of really strong opinions about the Fireflies and about how many bullets should be in them.
Fair enough.
And in their crotch specifically to justify what Abby does in this game.
Yeah, there was a very crotch-centric part of that argument.
Well, Abby is perfectly justified in whatever she does moving forward.
We motivated her character.
So, do we feel comfortable moving on now?
I don't know, Tucker, do you have any other things you want to backpedal and talk about?
Let's back it up a little bit here.
Before we get to the house again.
Let's back up to the beginning of part 1 and start there. No, I think, it's worth mentioning that Ellie goes into Joel's house to get his watch. The very, very strong symbolism of just Joel as a person, Joel's past. What happened to Sarah. Joel has the watch the entire part. And I think it's interesting that Joel doesn't have the watch on when he dies. He takes it off, which I thought was a very interesting detail of Joel's character. He wears this broken watch all throughout part 1, but something happens, with Ellie's curing him, his feralness, I'm going to call it, to where he's comfortable taking it off. He's laying those demons to rest, but then Ellie is picking those demons back up, which is really interesting symbolism.
I was going to ask that same question, Tucker. I was going to ask if any of you noticed when he wasn't, because I wasn't looking for it, I guess. I didn't notice that he wasn't wearing his watch when Abby kills him. And I was wondering how long it's been since he hadn't been wearing Sarah's watch anymore.
I wasn't sure he wasn't wearing it, or if it was pulled off him after he died and put in the box. I hadn't gone back and checked.
Well, and I was going to ask, in that same box, you've got the watch, and then there's a bloody cloth under it, and then there's the gun, right? And she takes the gun out of there as well. Carries that piece of Joel as well as the watch with her. But yeah, I didn't know, because I feel like I needed to go back and I didn't have time to go back and find that out. But if he wasn't or was,
I hear someone typing who's Googling it. Yeah.
You know what?
Google
I
it
would
now.
be curious is if the watch came off between the last conversation he has with Ellie and when he encounters Abby, if that's the moment he gets the closure he needs to put the watch down. All right. So we continue down the road in Jackson, and Dina is expressing camaraderie with Ellie. They want to go and chase down Abby, They think that Tommy has preempted their escape and, was being kind of a douche and went and told Maria, but in reality, he actually just left before they could. And Maria thinks he's a dip and wants them to go after him. Now, what do you think this says about Tommy and Maria's relationship?
I think that they're both really good at communicating.
I think they definitely tell everything to each other.
Well, I think it just, from at least Tommy's side, I think it shows that he, like, obviously he loves Maria. I think that they have a pretty healthy relationship for the most part, but I think that there's, like, Tommy's like, I have to do this, and I know that Maria's not going to let me go, so I'm going to have to just tell her whatever I need to tell her to get, like, to either, to like, get her to stop looking in my direction so I can sneak off, and, like, which is not a super cool thing to do to your wife, but he's got to go avenge Joel.
I think
in Tommy's eyes, that's the most important thing.
I think it's interesting with how this affects Ellie. They were planning on going together, or at least Ellie wanted to plan to go together. And I think this is Tommy protecting Ellie a little bit by saying, hey, let's talk about it tomorrow. And then he just bolts of, you know what, Joel would want Ellie to be protected. I'm just going to go do what Joel would do and go lone wolf and hunt these people down.
Kill everyone. That's what Joel would do.
Well, we see in part 1 that he would protect Ellie for Joel, right? Because he does decide at one point that he would go to the Fireflies with Ellie on Joel's behalf because Joel expresses that he thinks she would be safer with Tommy. And that's when Joel decides he would do it instead because Ellie doesn't feel comfortable going with Tommy. So I think you're right, Tucker, that he's both doing it to avenge Joel, but he's also doing it to protect Ellie.
Yeah, he didn't count on Maria. I'm sure that he assumed that she would be like, well, like that she would keep them there instead of being like, we'll go get him. Like, I think that Tommy expected Maria to keep Ellie and Dina there rather than send them off. Because Maria didn't just let them go. She, like, told them to go. She's like, all right, now you got to go get him.
Yeah, go save my dumbass husband. Also take the horse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because she has to make it look like they just stole the horse or escaped, that Maria didn't give them the blessing, which is really interesting leadership style for Maria. Is it's more so I need to keep up appearances. I have to say I don't want you to go based on keeping the status quo of Jackson, but really deep down I want you to go and get my husband back. So kind of just this, wink wink moment.
Well, I think important to her leadership style and to the dynamic in Jackson is autonomy. She needs to establish her authority in Jackson by allowing a certain amount of latitude in everybody's autonomy and self-expression. And so she still rules with an iron fist in like, keeping everybody cohesive and maintaining balance, but they still have the right to self-determination. And that's where she's like, well, if you are going to do this, and I know I can't technically stop you, and I do want you to do it, but I'm not going to be the one that tells you to do it, then I'm going to empower you to do it. Also, okay, in addition to this conversation, Tommy and Ellie have disagreed about whether Joel would go after Abby, but who do you think is right and why?
I don't know that I have a thought on who's right, but this was something that I was thinking about where it's like in our society, for us, it's easy to be like, no, revenge is bad. Don't go after those people. But that's because we have laws in place and we can place some kind of faith in like, well, the police will find them or, one day it'll catch up to them and they'll get caught. But in this world, it's like, there's no police, there's no law. And it's like, how is justice served in a world like that? I still personally don't know that I would go, guns a-blazing and be like, I'm going to go kill everybody for justice. But I think it's easier to understand that mentality in this world where it's like, there are no police. There's no way to like 911. They killed my brother. Well, it's like, if you want it done, you kind of got to do it yourself. And so from that view, I understand why they both were like, I want to Like we have to do this. It wasn't even a question of like, should we do this? It was like, let's go, let's just do it.
Right. You strip it down, all social contract and social cohesion, you're left with, I don't know, the Code of Hammurabi, an eye for an eye. And as I expressed before, I kind of feel like that uh, not social justice, criminal justice is a sort of non-violent. Sorry, I'm spacing my words, so I'm going to have to do a cleaner take. I feel like criminal justice is a collective non-violent action, and I don't know that there's a clean way to say this. I can't say it. Okay. I feel like criminal justice is a collective nonviolent vengeance on an individual for doing something that we have decided is collectively criminal. But if you have no social contract and there are no laws, then you go back to the Code of Hammurabi, and it is eye for an eye in order to prevent, future incidences of killing people or stealing things or things like that, right? Like, aren't we kind of back down to a stripped down version of enforcing these things?
I don't necessarily know. It's hard because the eye for an eye, it's a never ending cycle. I mean, eye for an eye is why Abby was hunting down Joel. And then eye for an eye is why Ellie and Dina and Tommy go after Abby and her crew. It's just this constant back and forth cycle of when is enough. There's no, okay, we're even now. We're only even if I'm winning type of thinking.
Right, but that's why we needed to evolve as a society to be able to put in arbiters and third parties to be able to arbitrate these disputes and to take the interpersonal a part of the equation out of it. And because otherwise, you're right, it's just a tit for tit, as Dwight would put it, situation.
Not the saying.
Well, it should be. Yeah. But I think this game makes an argument for what does it take to break that cycle if that is the only thing that you have. And it makes a compelling argument for somebody has to be the one to break it by being bigger than that. And the only way you can be bigger than that is with compassion. And the only way you can find compassion is by finding common ground. And to find common ground, you have to spend time with people. You have to learn who they are. And it takes a lot of work to be the one to forgive.
It's interesting. Because what the trap that they fall into is why the world is broken, right? Like the never ending cycle of violence and vengeance and people needing to get their own and to be right. It sets off the whole plot of the game, because people are the way they are. And ultimately, like you said, Shan, I think, how do you break this cycle? How do people be better? And people only be better by doing the hard work, by learning about others, finding common ground, showing compassion, actually building relationship with everyone. And that means everyone, including the people you don't like, and trying to walk in their shoes and figure out what it is to be them. Having compassion for people you don't like. And all of that is hard work that I think a lot of people in the apocalypse don't necessarily have the luxury for. I think it takes a period of Jackson. I think it takes people having their time in Jackson in this world and finding their humanity again to even entertain that as an option. But I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, Joel wouldn't have had that luxury to be able to consider how we find a better path forward than just continuing to kill because people get killed and because I need to get mine. It's such a vicious cycle. Actually, I was thinking about that playing this game and thinking how depressing it is, and just thinking, well, how can people just be better? Why can't we just all be better people?
Just be nice, you guys.
Just be nice, guys. Just be nice.
Okay, so let's really continue digging into Tommy, because I want to make him the character focus of this episode, because we're going to circle back to him by the end. But remember in How I Met Your Mother, there's always a reacher and there's always a settler. I believe Tommy's the reacher in this situation, and Maria has settled, but they more clearly
Slim
articulate in
Pickens
this
in the
show.
apocalypse.
They more clearly articulate in the show that Tommy is a joiner, and that he had joined the army at one point, and or something similar, and he had at one point joined Joel on his crusade for survival against innocent people and against the system and against institutions that had wronged him, I guess, is kind of how he pointed that anger. And now he, in a way, has joined himself to Maria because she is a strong leader. So it's really just another version, another proxy for him needing that type of dynamic in his life. Somebody with a strong leadership style that will help guide him. Remember in the show, it's really funny. He's an ideologue. He really likes joining himself with idealistic causes, and he doesn't even realize that he's blindly aligned himself with what Maria has described as socialism, even though in his core he doesn't agree with the concept of socialism. He doesn't even know that's what it is, but he's aligned himself with it because he's just a follower. I think that really sums up the type of person he is perfectly.
Well, and I think that there's a certain level of there's a certain level of comfort with being like, it's nice to let someone else make the big decisions and like kind of piggyback off of that. I've been in situations professionally where it's like I owned a small business, and that was really hard, and it was not easy to be the person where like the buck stops at you, and there was a lot of times during that where I was like, I really just want someone else to be my boss. Like I would love for someone else to just be like, hey, do this, and for me to be like, okay. Like, and so I think that for some people it's like it's easy to just kind of slip into like I'm going to follow you, I'm going to do the things that you want to do, and because it's just comfortable in a way, and not good or bad, and sometimes you can follow the wrong people, and that's obviously bad, but in this instance I think that Tommy kind of lucked out, and he decided to follow someone with some good ideas who's trying to do good things for a good group of people, and so he kind of lucked out in that way.
Tommy is just a sheep with a gun. That's all he is.
That's all he is.
Up until Joel's death. I think this is where his character really takes a big developmental step forward, because he has been a follower. He has been a joiner. This is maybe one of the first instances in his life where he goes out by himself for his own reasons. Not because somebody asked him to, not because of some, greater good, but this is a selfish reason that Tommy is going out to hunt down Abby and her crew, which I think just more illustrates the point that Tommy catches the Joel disease. I love that analogy. He catches the Joel disease and becomes a version of Joel himself. Tomo the Joel. Or Jommy. Jommy.
Jommy Tomo Joel. I want to come back to that.
Yeah.
He clearly had a lot of respect for Joel. He was, disturbed by what they had become in the 20-year interim phase. And so he was scared by it and ran away, but he had a lot of respect for him. And that was shown in part 1 when they reunited and he still loved him and embraced him. And so I think just the shock of losing him triggered him to go out and seek vengeance. But it caught him so off guard that you're right. This is the first time he's been in a situation where nobody asked him to do something. And so he doesn't know what he's going to do while he's doing it. And so the only role model he has for this situation is Joel. And so it's just this bloodthirsty path of kill anybody between point A and B. And we're going to see that take the, darkest path possible.
Yep. Joelitis. Symptoms include murdering everyone.
Mostly just that. That's mostly the symptom.
Does this contradict what Tommy had decided to do when he left Joel for Jackson? or do you think this makes sense with his character?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Well, yes, I do think it makes sense with his character. I mean, speaking of Joel wanting to be a sheep rancher, sheep are really stupid, right? Sheep will follow each other right into danger, right into the jaws. Sheep are so stupid.
For all of you sheep listening, we're very sorry that Luke said that about you. Just want to publicly apologize.
Sorry. You're just so dumb.
We're gonna get sheep canceled.
You're just so dumb it can't not be said. Sheep are not smart. They will literally follow each other off of a cliff, if that's what it comes to.
Well, as long as you're not the first one, you get a soft landing.
Oh, right, yeah. Then you're fine.
Nice and fluffy. That's why it's fun. You think that they're dumb and they're just having a good time. Yeah.
But that's why they evolved to have wool, is for soft landings.
The only reason. Yeah.
But the fact that Tommy, talking about him being a sheep, followed Joel, maybe did a bunch of terrible stuff that he regrets and has said that he regretted, and yet he did it all. For better or worse, he learned from Joel. He did all of these things. So if he's a sheep, sure, but he's still, he's not a mindless lemming. Like, he did these things. He had a role model that showed him a bad way to do it. But then he also got good things from Joel. Joel was a good role model for him in a lot of ways. Then he has Maria, who's also a good role model for him in a lot of other ways. And I think he's taken a lot from both of these people. I don't think it's out of character for him to go on this revenge rampage. Not, I think, from either perspective. I don't think it's a contradiction of what he learned from Maria either. I mean, he's learned in Jackson to take care of people, to work on behalf of a collective, to work for the greater good. But like you said, Shan, there's no law in this universe. There's no one coming to make right what happened to anyone. Not saying that, Joel probably didn't deserve what was coming to him based on what he did to the Fireflies. And also not saying that the Fireflies maybe also had it coming. But the fact that there's no law, there's no objective third-party arbiter to oversee all of this, I don't think it's out of character for Tom, it's not out of character for Tommy to go after this revenge or to leave Maria and Jackson. I mean, he leaves a note. He says, "Take care of Ellie." Like he
left a note.
He left a note.
Fine.
It was fine. But I think he learned from Joel that protection of people, protecting Ellie, making sure that in the note he said to keep her safe, to leave her behind, even if he was foolish enough to think that Ellie wouldn't find a way to follow him anyway. I don't think it's a contradiction. I think Tommy's kind of charting out the best path he can based on the experiences he's had up to this point in his life. He both seeks revenge, but he also tries to protect and do right. And I think that makes sense with where he's at.
Right. A few thoughts. He's a grown-ass man. So that's going to... It's not like every decision he makes is driven by what someone else tells him to do. He is still a sum of all of the decisions he's made up until this point. He can still be an autonomous human being. He is swayed by strong leadership, that is proven, but he's still an adult man who will make... But very important to his character that we've seen and we will see time and time again is that he's impulsive. And we just had an incredible catalyst trigger him. And so he was triggered to leave Jackson impulsively, and that broke him off from a leadership figure, Maria. So now he is without a leader and he's on a path of impulsivity.
The wild card.
He's wild card, baby. I think that actually plays perfectly into his character. And most importantly, he's doing it to protect Ellie on Joel's behalf. So I actually think that is one of the most critical aspects of why he started doing it.
Thank you for wording that so much better than I did.
Yeah, we could just cut all of Luke's...
Cut everything I said and just take what Shan said. Because that's what I was trying to say, but you definitely said it better.
Just moving forward, let's just cut about half of everything that Luke says. Yeah.
Tommy is a chicken with its head cut off, and Maria is the chicken head. And we're gonna see.
Cheek chop.
We're gonna see what the chicken body does. for the next 30 hours.
It's a very... Yeah, Tucker got it. He did the chicken dance. A coodle-doodle-doo. A coodle-doodle-doo.
A doodle-doo.
This is we're playing a game with ourselves today, everyone, to see how many pop culture references we can make. I wanted to jump in and say that's why you leave a note after Luke was done talking, but I missed my opportunity. So I shoehorned it in here, baby, and do whatever I want.
I'm an adult.
I'm an adult. Oh, there we go. There's another one.
There we go.
Hey, pop culture.
That's
the best culture.
I don't need this garbage. Pump this garbage in another man's veins. I throw it on the ground. All right. Anyway, that was
not a part of the system.
So there we go. There's the tie-in. That's Joel.
There it is.
He's not a part of the system. Yeah.
I'm
now
an
Tommy.
adult.
And now Tommy.
All right. So why is Dina going with Ellie?
Yes.
Because she loves her.
Because she loves her.
She initiated her ride or die protocol.
There's her nerve. So I was diving down subreddits like one does when they have a sad life. And that's not true. I have a sad dad life. I have a wonderful life, but I was diving down a subreddit. And I was amazed at the number of people who didn't realize that Ellie was gay and that her and Dina were lovers. I don't know how you even get this far into the story. That blows my
you mean up until
mind.
Now?
That people were writing on, like, trying to offer meaningful insight, saying, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there are subtle hints that Ellie might be gay up to this point in the game. And I'm going, what?
The subtle hint being that they make out on a couch. Yeah. Very subtly.
I will say that I was one of those people. I didn't realize that because I didn't play the Left Behind DLC. Just stop it. Look, give me a second to explain
Eric
myself.
has the worst gaydar in the world.
I have the worst gaydar in the world. And so no, just stop making face. Let me explain it. I never played the Left Behind DLC, and so I never got that aspect of Ellie. Didn't ever see any of the stuff with her and Riley. And then I saw trailers for like the Last of Us Part 2, and I was like, oh, I guess Ellie's gay. I had no idea. And then I played the Left Behind thing, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. She always was that way.
She was idea. Yeah, it wasn't like a brand new thing for the second game. She definitely was always that way. But on top of that, even into the first, anyway, this is just a tangent. I was reading these Reddit comments. I'm going to get back to what I was saying. People not realizing she was gay up until this point, which I just can't fathom that you couldn't. But crap, and now I lost where I was. Stupid Dina. So I think Dina's got a lot of reason to follow Ellie and do this thing right. We know a little bit about Dina up until now. I don't think we know tons about Dina's character up until now. We learn a lot later in this chapter about her and about her sister and more about Dina's backstory along the way. But up until now, I don't think you know too much about Dina, other than there's very obviously chemistry between her and Ellie. There's a budding romance, a love story going on there. And I think Dina wanting to go with Ellie shows a lot about her, because Dina, what we know about her, she's got a pretty cushy life in Jackson, because she didn't. Do we know that she didn't grow up in a QZ at this point? I don't think we actually learned that until later.
We don't learn it now. We learn it later.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, and like it's like in the very next part of the game, they talk about how she did not grow up in a QZ. Because she's asking Ellie lots of questions about what it was like to grow up in a QZ.
So up until now, the only thing you really know about Dina is that she lives in Jackson and she loves Ellie. But that's enough. I think we've seen a cushy enough life in Jackson that Dina being willing to go on a big adventure and into danger, almost certain danger and death with Ellie, that says a lot about Dina and how much she really cares for Ellie. This isn't just like teenage romance. This isn't just like some average hormonal thing. She's willing to put it all on the line for Ellie. This moment tells me a lot about Dina until we learn a whole lot more about Dina that I don't think we knew before.
Okay,
yeah, but Dina takes Ellie's fight personally as well. So Ellie's fight becomes Dina's fight, which I think is really, I'm going to go on a limb here and say is a sign of true love, is how much she actually really does care about Ellie. So I agree with you, Luke. It's not just a hormonal teenage romance. This is getting into adult relationships, which I think plays out really nicely through the rest of the game between Dina and Ellie.
Okay, but dig deeper. More than love, why does Dina want Ellie to murder Abby? Because her sister was murdered, and she thinks that Ellie is justified. I don't think you go to, I'm okay with my significant other murdering people unless you've seen the other side.
Shan, you're not in the apocalypse. You don't know. You don't know anything.
You don't know. You didn't kill someone when you were 10 years old, okay?
Well, Dina references that situation a little bit later in the chapter where she makes a comment about, she's like, if I had my sister's killers, I would have done the same, or something. And I don't want to bring that up too early, but we know that like Dina does have that motivation inside of her to be like, I received this injustice and I wasn't able to do anything about it when my sister died. And now that same injustice, well, a similar one, father figure, not the same as sister, but Ellie's father figure has been killed. And Dina has a chance to now be a part of what they both view as justice for the situation. So I think it's more than just Joel and more than just solidarity for Ellie. It's Dina wanting some kind of vicarious justice for her sister as well.
Yeah, I feel like if I were in this situation, I've gone years of my sister or other family member having been murdered by other people, knowing that I couldn't get closure because there was no justice. So that justice is required for closure. So you have to help the person you love get justice in order to move on. And she wants Ellie to move on so that she can have a meaningful relationship, because she knows that not moving on means that their relationship can never truly be healthy. And we actually get to see that later in the game.
All right, everybody, welcome back from the break. We want to say thanks to Lundy for being here with us today. Super excited to have you on the show. Why don't you take just a minute, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background, and yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Lundy. Basically, everybody calls me that, including most of my immediate family. My real name is Alex Lundberg, but, basically my mom and nobody else calls me Alex. So that's why, that's a little bit about that. Background, I have a little bit of experience in, some a little bit of podcasting and radio broadcasting. Former sports radio wannabe and now current sports radio has been. But, and I enjoy playing video games in my downtime, when I get some, a little bit of time to myself. Nice way to relax, unless, it's playing a game like The Last of Us where I am just constantly on edge at all times because I don't handle scary things very well. But I love these games, and so I'm always, into them. But yeah, and so I dabble, I guess, is the best way to go about it, so I think that's kind of the angle that got me invited on here a little bit, was the fact that I've talked on the air a little bit, and I play a few games here and there, and I'm not dad, but I am sad, so,
Same with Luke here. How many times have you played The Last of Us?
How many times have I played The Last of Us? That is a good question. I feel like I play through it yearly.
Yeah, that's where
so
I'm
it's
at.
been a lot of times through, and every single time, like, I am just like I can only play it when the sun is up, and I have to have the volume down a little bit. And I actually this current time, because I've been listening to your past episodes, and you talked about the sound design is so impressive and immersive, and I was like, I've never even tried playing these with headphones before, so I've been doing it this time, and that was a mistake. I am just the infected already sound horrifying just from a sound bar, but when I put the immersive, just a 3D audio in there, and it's just, I might need to see if I can get a sponsorship from like Depends or something when I start playing, because I need a lot of that.
So you need to go back to
I can attest to Lundy's aversion to scary things. I've been trying to get him to play Resident Evil 4 for years, and he's like, nope, can't do it. And I'll get him sooner or later, though. Yeah.
I'm where you're at, Lundy. Like, I still haven't played Resident Evil 4 because I don't do well with scary video games, because because you take it personally, because you're the person there, right? Like I take it way too seriously. My heart like feels like it's going to come out of my chest when I play this game. Nonetheless, Resident Evil 4, which is so much worse.
Yeah, it's
Try
not
to
even
more
just.
sociopath like Shan.
I mean, it's not even just video games for me. Like, when I was like 14, I watched The Ring because, when you're 14, scary movies are the cool thing to do. And I watched The Ring and couldn't go in my basement alone for a month. Like, that's just, it's.
Oh, I still don't do basements. Yeah, I don't do
and,
basements.
Like,
Don't
permanently
do basements.
scarred by, that scene in Signs when the alien walks in front of this, still.
That was everybody. That wasn't just you. Yeah.
Night terrors from that. I haven't even seen Final Destination, and I still panic when I see log trucks on the freeway. Like
every millennial.
It's in
does,
one trailer, one time. And now Lundy can't take the freeway. Yeah.
Just yeah.
Okay, everyone's favorite horror movie. For me, it has to be now The Thing, John Carpenter. I was transfixed by the body horror and realizing how many things were taken from that movie to make Resident Evil 4.
I don't know that this counts as horror per se, but I love The Quiet Place. I've been really, really impressed by both Quiet Place and Quiet Place Part 1.
The first one especially.
Yeah, but the first one especially, I love that movie. And I don't know that it necessarily counts as horror, but...
It's suspense primarily.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that would have been my number one.
So... more classic horror-ish. I really like The Conjuring, like the supernatural kind of witch type of stuff. Blair Witch Project did not age very well. When it came out, I loved it, but watching it back, it's rough. More of a new horror is I really like Get Out, that Jordan Peele type of horror.
That is
it's just so good.
Does Alien count as horror? That's horror, right? Sci-fi
Only the
horror?
first one. The second one is horror action.
Horror, yeah.
Yeah, the first Alien movie friggin' rules. I love that movie.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't really watch scary things because I just can't handle it. So I will say that my favorite, having a clown phobia, my favorite is probably The Dark Knight. Like, that movie terrified me because it was just like, it's a clown and it's murdering people. Like, I told you so. And so, yeah, Dark Knight terrified me, but great movie. And so I know it's not a horror movie, but it counts. It counts. It is in here.
You know what?
It is in
here.
We'll
give it to and again, that's not just a you thing. Everyone's afraid of clowns. And if they're not, you need to immediately be concerned about that person.
Something's wrong with
them
you.
Out of your life.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with them. Everyone is or should be afraid of clowns.
Do you remember when there was in 2017 the clown apocalypse, like where clowns just randomly started showing up to places? And
terrible idea.
Like, my family used to always make fun of me for being scared of clowns, and then it was like there was just clowns all over the news, and they were like, be careful, like there's random clowns. And I was like, I told you so. Every single one of you owes me an apology. I was the only person who knew this would happen.
I'd like a written apology from all of you.
That was the reason I didn't play Pokemon Go at night, is because of the stupid clowns going around. So I had to conserve my Pokemon Go in that year for just daytime.
Just another thing ruined by clowns.
Terrible confluence of events. But my favorite book is It by Stephen King. So I'm one of those people that you should excise from your life.
Have not, will not read or watch the book or either movie. Absolute
hard pass.
I do disavow one specific chapter in the book, and anybody who's read it will know exactly what I'm talking about. But other than that, fantastic book. All right, let's move on. All right, so we are going to move into Seattle Day 1. We have left Jackson for a short time. We are riding horseback on Shimmer into Seattle, and we are entering the quarantine zone, another Fedra previously occupied area by Fedra. They have had a bad run, Is there anything still standing that we know of other than Boston?
Every major city has been destroyed that we know of. Like, we haven't
and the
seen...
Seattle QZ is a mess. Like, it's almost unrecognizable as a QZ. It's just a mess. Yeah.
You know what? I think that it was a bad idea to try to set up a military authoritarian regime in America, even post-apocalyptic. There was
so many guns.
There was no chance.
No chance.
Those idiots.
You try that crap somewhere else, it doesn't fly in
What
America.
did you think this was, Switzerland? Come on, guys.
There are more guns than people in this country. Like, what did you think was going
that
to
has
happen?
never
Should
been
be,
more
yeah.
true than in
America.
this timeline.
Yeah.
So the QZ is gone, as it should be. They are as dead as the Fireflies, and we get to we come to find out that they have been swept out by the WLFs. We don't find out until later that they are referred to as the Wolves when we find a picture of a wolf on a wall. I have to call out specifically how absurd this is, that an anagram such as WLF isn't immediately said out loud to be wolf, because in Utah there is a billboard that is J and then like a delimiter that goes straight up and down, this vertical delimiter, and then a Z. So J, vertical delimiter, Z. There is not a human alive that doesn't pass that billboard that doesn't call that billboard Jizz, right? And the full name is
Terrible marketing.
It's a hair studio, and it's Jizz Hair. And the
You ever
slogan
guys
is
watched something
Jizz
about
hair.
Mary?
Stop.
The slogan is Jizz Hair everywhere.
I can't believe
No
we haven't
human
talked
alive
about
doesn't
this.
say it.
Oh, we need to put some kind of adult content warning on this episode. Ugh,
I mean, so
that's terrible.
similar to that, not quite as good as that, but like there's a certain religious based school in Utah that one of the buildings, like a lot of buildings, they just kind of abbreviate the name of it, and I honestly truly can't tell you what the full name of the building is on that campus, but the abbreviation is MLF, and everybody 100% of everybody that I know that went there that didn't, like, whatever, everybody refers to that building as the MILF. Like,
Yep.
it's the MILF. Like, hey, where's this meeting? Oh, it's over in the MILF. Like, that's just what everybody calls it. And it's like, let's maybe like think about that. Like, but I mean, yeah, there's a reason.
When I see ads for MILFs near me, it's talking about BYU.
Yep,
I mean,
that's what it is.
probably, like they're the Cougars for a reason, right? Like,
Yeah.
Hey-o.
Heyo.
Now Jizz Hair Studio did rebrand by taking that
Too
delimiter
late.
out of the branding, but it's now just JZ. So they didn't change the order. It's still Jizz Hair. It's still Jizz Hair.
A little bit better, a little bit worse. Yeah.
Nope.
Please
just
say
worse.
please say jizz 3 or 4 more times. I don't think our listeners.
What's the limit? Yeah.
And then
Need a definition to pop up here for our
Yeah,
listeners
let's
on
put a
YouTube.
chyron
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
define the
chyron.
term, but like bleep it out. Every time you say jizz, we can have Emily just go to beep.
It's just a chyron full of asterisks. Yeah.
It's not my fault. They brought this into the conversation.
They
It
did
reminds
this
me
to
of
me.
There was a furniture store. I can't remember where I was living at the time, but the name of the furniture store was, and I'm going to say it with a big pause in the middle, but it was the furniture store called Sofa Pause King. And that was the name of the furniture store. And I was like, that's a terrible name for a place.
They did that on purpose.
Yeah.
I sure hope
It's either
so.
really good or really bad marketing. It's hard to tell.
All right, and you want to know some trivia that nobody wants to know is that an acronym is different than initialism. And an initialism is, it's an abbreviation formed by the initial letters of a phrase that are pronounced separately. So this would be like a CPU, whereas an acronym is something like SWAT, something that you say out loud. So this would be like the MILF building. So there
I
is
think we
actually
need the
a difference.
NBC, the more you know, like little shooting star.
The more you
in
know.
this.
Fun facts with Shan.
Right. So you might think that you're creating an
Looks on top
initialism,
of it.
but squint real hard and see if you're creating an acronym, because it might be dirty.
Wolf.
Because I'm pretty sure that, let's see, on The Office, when they're like, I'm pretty sure that DM does,
B?
what is it? GB means something kind of dirty. All right, we're going to have to cut like half of that out. All right, so...
That's how you know it's a good
Definitely leave
episode.
the jizz part in.
That's what she said.
Half the jizz.
Heyo.
Okay, so I'm really transfixed by the game design when we come into Seattle day one. It reminded me of when I played Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, because there's this section in The Lost Legacy where you're on the island and it turns into a sort of open world exploration where there's like 4 or 5 different points of the island that you have to hit, but you can do it in any order that you want. So it is really empowering to your autonomy as a player to just kind of go wherever your eye leads you. And so this is something that started in but like I was fascinated when I played that game how they did it, because no, this is Uncharted 4, isn't it?
Where you have the little, like the open area. I think they
Yes.
might do it in Lost Legacy as well, but they definitely do it in Uncharted 4. I think.
Right, so
it's been a
this
minute
is
since I
like
played it, but
this is like a specialty of like the Neil Druckmann era of Naughty Dog. And I'm always like fascinated by how they navigated doing a linear story in this open world design, because they kind of have this like flag. Every time you get on Shimmer, it triggers a new like stint of dialogue that plays out between you and Dina, and it's only ever just long enough for you to get between one point and another and advance the story a small amount more. And there's only just enough of those interactions to allow you to navigate all of the open world areas in that zone. I thought that was brilliant.
It's brilliant, yeah. Because it's designed so that there's no dead space if you're getting just story, but there's also just enough time for you to get just the story. But then if you want to be that person like Eric that crawls under cars to see if the grass is shaded under there, you can do that too. Like there can be a lot of space for you to pause and think and explore and look in this area. So I just a shout out to that detail that there's always just enough time and space for the narrative to breathe. But then if you want more breath because you want to go and really explore, there's space for that too. I think that's really great design.
Well, you can also like interrupt the dialogue for an interaction, and then they have coded in like a what was I saying? And then it cuts back in the dialogue as
really
if
great.
You hadn't interrupted. Just seamless.
And I've played other games where it has a similar system, but it doesn't do it quite as well. There are a lot of really clear flags in The Last of Us Part 2 where it's like after each sentence almost. So when you get back on the horse, it picks up right back where you left off. God of War Ragnarok is a good example of taking this a little bit too far, because it's a great game, and I have mostly positive things to say about the game, but they have a similar thing where there's dialogue in between everything that you do. And sometimes it's like, please shut up. Like it's too, just be quiet for a minute. Like there doesn't always need to be, there's no quiet moments in that game. And so, I found myself where I'd like
me the answers.
Please stop giving me the answers. But I'd like, you'd hop off the boat and they'd stop talking, and then you'd get back on the boat and they'd be like, what was I saying? And then they'd go back like 5 lines and say everything over again. And so the flags in the conversation weren't quite as frequent as they are in this part, or in The Last of Us Part 2. So I really appreciated it. It made the conversations feel more organic and less like dialogue being read off a sheet and being like kind of spit at you by an algorithm. It felt more like this is how these people would naturally interact with each other. You know, if Ellie's getting off the horse and she's got to go grab some supplies, and then she gets back on the horse and Dina's like, oh, by the way, I was saying this. And then she finishes her thought. It's like, it felt very natural and it flowed really well.
Right. Okay. So what do we know about the story that took place in the QZ before we had arrived there? What happened?
What do we know, like us ourselves, or what do Ellie and Dina know at this point?
No, whoa. The mise en scène, right? Like, what do we know about the interaction between the WLFs, the Wolves, and the Fedra occupation?
It seemed kind of like a similar conflict, but that happened in the Boston QZ between Fedra and the Fireflies, except for that the Wolves seemed to be more organized in larger numbers and more armed, because they were much more successful in their pushback. I think that when you're riding into town, or I don't remember exactly what part, but Ellie and Dina are having a conversation where Dina is like, was it ever this bad in Boston? And Ellie's like, no, but they didn't have a full-blown civil war in Boston, which is like what the Seattle QZ looks like. It's like, it looks like a war zone that has been overgrown over the last, X number of years. So, yeah.
It reminded me a lot of the Kansas City part of the show, of part 1, where in the game it's hunters, they overthrow Fedra in Pittsburgh, but in the show it feels a lot more Civil War-esque, a lot more organized, where the hunters felt a little bit more sporadic, if you will, not as organized. So yeah, I think Civil War is probably the perfect way to add this. And then we also have the Sephirotes. Was that what they're called?
Seraphites.
Sephirotes
is from Final Fantasy.
Okay, there you go.
High five to me. I made a joke.
Yeah, we have the Seraphites that come in and I think are almost in another civil war in this area, which I think is a really interesting dynamic of. It reminds me of playing Lord of the Rings Risk, where the Shire is just hotly contested all the time.
It's not nerdy when most of us have played it, except
everybody's played Lord of the Rings Risk except Eric.
I have also played it.
I have Lord of the Rings Risk just upstairs. Like, I have it. Like, I could go get it right now. I know exactly where it is.
5 for 5.
Use your Way is Under the Mountains card and F them up.
No one ever sees that coming. All right, so I think we end up finding a lot of documentation or files placed around this area that show that Isaac used to belong to the QZ, right? And he ends up turning against them. He ends up turning other people against them. They create a sort of faction that ends up trying to split off and then turn on Fedra and the QZ, and then they grow big enough that they at one point try to intercept a convoy as they're coming into town, and that's where you see this whole area that's in complete disarray. And you see traders that had been murdered in a Fedra truck, and you just see all this. Like, this is where the city died, is when you had this clash between the wolves and the QZ, and the city is dead now. And this is where we establish that Isaac is a real threat. I think that it's brilliant that we show this from Ellie's perspective and Dina's perspective, because when we jump to Abby, she sees Isaac as a powerful leader. She doesn't yet see him as a threat, and that plays a lot into a mechanic of the game, which is that it's all about perspective, and we're using dramatic irony to establish Isaac as a threat, because you get to play as Ellie and see him as a threat, but Abby doesn't see him that way. So you both get that cognitive dissonance when you're in Abby's body of the character not thinking that, but in your own head, he is. I love that. All right, so what are your favorite sections in this downtown area?
The bank. I love the bank.
All right, Eric, you get to talk about it.
Yeah, so you go into this broken down bank, and it's full of a bunch of clickers. And there was a couple of things about this that I really, really liked. Again, talking about the sound design, playing with headphones. You get into this bank where it's a fairly confined area. There's lots of really echoey walls. And so I got down there, I wiped out some of the runners and I started clearing out the room, and I was listening, and I was like, there's like 3 or 4 clickers left in here. And so I'm like trying to be really careful, and I couldn't quite see them. And I was trying to not use the listen through walls things where you can just see where all the enemies are, trying to, kind of do it on my own. And then I kill a clicker, and then all of the sound is gone. And it was that moment where I realized that there was only 1 clicker left in that room, but the way the sound was designed, it was echoing off of all the walls, and it really enhanced this feeling of suspense and of fear. I thought that there was way more infected in there than there was. There was like 4 or 5 of them, not that many. And then you get this really great story of like these people that tried to rob the bank on Outbreak Day, which was just like, it just showed that like people's perspective hadn't shifted that much yet, that they were still thinking, oh, banks have money. We need money. This crazy crap's going down. Let's get all that money. And then in like a few weeks, that money means nothing anymore.
Idiots.
So I thought that was a really fun little side story. And then also one thing that I liked from a gameplay perspective when you're leaving the bank, because oftentimes in video games, you go into an area, you clear it out, and then you're kind of free to explore. It like lets you breathe this sigh of like, oh, I cleared out the area. I can stand up. I don't have to crouch and be quiet. I'm going to like get all the documents and loot all the things and stuff. But when you go into the safe of the bank and you get the loot and stuff in there, and then as you start to leave, more infected come back in. And so I'm like in full sprint mode, like ready to just run back out of this building onto and get back on Shimmer and start riding around and go to the next place. And then I hear these clicker noises and I immediately just, oh no. And I like gasp, I audibly gasp, and I like drop to the ground. And I meant to just crouch, but I pushed the circle button so hard that Ellie like belly flopped onto the ground and was like, ugh. It just was this really immediate and realistic fear response of like, oh no, there's more of them. Like, and I thought that was such a cool subversion of my expectations from a gameplay perspective. So I really enjoy the little side story in that bank area. Super fun.
Every time, because Tucker mentioned it in a previous episode, I'm reminded of Tim Robinson going through the drive-through. And so when you
I can just leave.
you get the shotgun, and then the new clickers arrive, and you're like, oh, I can just leave. And so you just run past them and up the cliff and get out of there without having to waste your bullets on them.
So I love the bank, and shout out definitely to the sound design. I'm obsessed with the synagogue. I love the synagogue as a location. It's my favorite location downtown for so many reasons. From a narrative perspective, it's in the synagogue where you learn a lot about Dina. You get much more of her backstory. She's teaching Ellie about, that you find the Torah in there, and she says, well, this is a Torah. What's the Torah? It's kind of like a Jewish Bible. And all of those opportunities because you spend the whole ride into Seattle kind of feeling like Ellie's in the driver's seat saying, well, this is how a QZ works, and Fedra did this and that. And Ellie's kind of taking on the role of explaining the political and social dynamic of a QZ to Dina. And then here you get Dina flipping the coin, her getting to explain the human and spiritual aspect of this building and what it means to her. And even post-apocalyptic, what this building still means to Dina and how she used to go there. And you learn that Dina still prays sometimes. All those little details I love about the synagogue. I love it. Also the sound design, right? You get such a stark contrast.
Echoey.
Yeah, so echoey, and the way that it bounces off of the wood and the parapets in there, it's very different from the bank.
Right. They were very specifically like showing off between the bank and the synagogue. You have like these hard surfaces, and you have multiple like chambers in the bank. And so you're getting these hard surfaces that are bouncing off each other. And then immediately upon entering the synagogue, you hear the wood absorbing sound.
That, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the way that the wood soaks up sound in a way that it doesn't bounce off the marble in the bank. That is so cool. That's an incredible attention to detail. I also love, I just had to shout this out, because they're looking for gas, and that we go through that like garage where it's wet, and we go over and there's no gas in there.
This is the courthouse, right?
Yeah, that's at the courthouse. But of course it's in the synagogue where they get the gas. Like, of course that's where they're able to find oil or gases, in the synagogue. It was funny to me. I felt like it had to be on purpose. Like the story of Hanukkah, for those of you that don't know, the Maccabean rebellion against the Greeks is...
Hang on, I feel like I'd understand the story a lot better if you would put on a holiday armadillo costume really quick.
I only know it from the episode of Friends.
The story of the Maccabees.
The Maccabees. But the fact that, the menorah and the candles, that comes from the fact that they didn't have enough oil to even keep it lit for one night, and the miracle is that it stays lit for 8 days and nights. And so the fact that they find that oil, that gas, in the synagogue, I find to be like, of course they did. I thought that was a neat little nod to the story of Hanukkah, but also the idea that they would find some hope and some aid in the synagogue. I find really, really impactful at this point in the story, because it's also the point where we're learning that Dina has has some spirituality to her character, an aspect of that faith. I love everything about the synagogue. I like what it does narratively for us learning about Dina, and I also love that that's where they find the gas.
I love subtextually to the conversations in the synagogue between Ellie and Dina. Ellie's kind of prodding at Dina to see the extent of her spirituality, because she's uncomfortable that she might have a greater depth of connection to spiritual things than she does, because, especially from the first one, I think she has a conversation with, is it Sam, about if she believes in the afterlife and she doesn't. And I'm sure that's even more hardened now. So I think it's just like, we see time and time again in this game, she has no purpose. She feels empty. She has a god hole, as they would put it in It's Always Sunny. and so she's learning from Dina, like, why do you feel the need for religion? And Dina expresses, like, I feel, to paraphrase, she feels the need to direct her appreciation for things, her gratitude towards something. And Ellie just doesn't know what to do with her emptiness. And that's not where she lands. But we're going to see, all the ways that her emptiness drives her and how it affects her throughout this game.
Yeah. And I like that Dina mentions she offers a prayer at Joel's grave. And when Ellie's talking to her about it, she's talking about prayer, and Ellie says, does it help? And I just got this like sense of kind of what you're saying, this emptiness from Ellie. That's almost just like, does it help? Like, cause maybe I should try praying. And I don't know if that's like what I'm getting from Ellie, but like a question that seemed pretty genuine of like, does it help you feel better? And then Dina responds with saying it's like a way to deal with grief and a way to show respect. And I think that that's a really, especially in a world like this, that's, it's probably really hard to have faith in something bigger than yourself, that even if it's just a way for them to show respect and to deal with grief, I think that that's a nice, I like that you get that nice moment with those characters in this, the Jewish synagogues. Very cool.
And it's also that like little bit of dialogue when Ellie's trying to show respect for the synagogue, but then they find the gasoline and she says, oh, hell yeah. And she says, watch your language. This is a place of worship. And she said, I just found some gasoline. And then Dina says, oh, F yeah.
We also get to find out. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, the synagogue is my favorite spot as well. More so that it gives a glimpse of more how Dina was raised. In a society where she, like Ellie, was born after Outbreak Day. And she is in a society where she was going to worship services still. She knows all these different things, which is really interesting of showing life outside of being raised in the QZ, being raised not under Fedra's thumb, like Ellie was. So I really liked it just to imagine this world, because before this moment, I'm thinking, okay, everybody was raised in the QZ, everybody had this hardened life, everybody was under this authoritarian regime, but that's not true. There were some people that were living in a place maybe not as secure as Jackson, but like Jackson, they were still going on with their regular lives. They were still going to worship services. You just now have, the introduction of Infected as another, enemy similar to like a mountain lion or something, but that's a lot more dangerous and can spread a lot faster than, it's like more like a werewolf, I guess.
A mountain werewolf.
That's also, what it is. Like, did in the Boston QZ, did we never encounter, like, there's so many churches in Boston. There are a million churches in Boston. I think it's interesting. Maybe I just didn't notice, but I don't remember us encountering a church ever in our travels in Boston.
There was Bill's church.
They were in Bill's town, but that's not in
Lincoln.
QZ.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. This is kind of the first house of worship we actually explored certainly from Ellie's perspective. And like you said, Tucker, that they were both raised post-outbreak, but Dina was raised in a place where they still had worship. and it seems like Ellie really wasn't.
I also want to give a shout out to the writers for giving respect to religion, for allowing both Bill's church and the synagogue to not place the infected in these places, because I would have been fine with it, but allowing it to just be a peaceful location, and because like if there was, an effing rat king in the synagogue, I could not play this game a single other time and not like have a heart attack every time I go into this place. But they allow it to have that piece that people want to associate with that location. And I thought, they didn't have to undermine that for a cheap scare. And I loved that they did that.
I was going to say, I had the same takeaway where, like, especially my first playthrough, I went into it, and I feel like in so many different horror things, which, I mean, as previously mentioned, like, I'm kind of a basic bitch when it comes to horror and stuff, and so I get scared really easily. And so it to me, it seems like it's a trope that it's like, oh, house of worship, extra scary. And like, so like the first time playing through, I got in there and I was like, oh, here we go. Like, this is, it's a place of worship. There's going to be something. And the fact that they kept it as a symbol of peace and a symbol of hope. Like, you find that note from the rabbi where it's like, we're turning this over to Fedra, we're leaving, like, but there's like this note of hope for the future. And it's like, this is a really cool thing to put here in the game, and it really, I love that they put that, like, that there's this glimmer of hope, there's this option of hope, at least, even it's way in the past now that all of this happened, so in some ways it's just even a memory of hope. But it shows that there's still that capability for goodness, for light, for belief and things like that, which adds so much more weight to the story when Ellie actively chooses not to find the good in these situations as she keeps pushing forward, driven by this loss of Joel. She has so many opportunities where she could, like, okay, this is a time to maybe step back and reevaluate, like, what I'm doing, and the game forces you down that path. And I think that, coming off of that experience in the synagogue, where she does have that conversation with Dina, where she's like asking, okay, tell me about this, and you do learn more and more about, even post-outbreak, there are people that are still clinging to these things that bring them hope and bring them light, that we still see the conscious choice to turn away from that.
Yeah, there was a small story that you were alluding to in the synagogue where the rabbi had helped somebody find light in a dark place. I love that religion can offer that to people who need it. And all religion can offer that to people if that's what they're looking for.
Well, no, I agree with that. And I think you get a little bit of that as well in the first game when you come into Salt Lake and you have that really beautiful moment with Ellie and Joel and the giraffes, and you can see the Salt Lake Temple in the background. It's like they didn't use that as a backdrop for like a scary moment. They used it as like a symbol for calm, and I thought it was cool.
Right. I keep pointing it at Neil Druckmann only because his is the only name I know attached
it's
to
all
this
Neil.
game.
No one else worked on the game, just Neal. Yeah.
But
I'm just kidding. Lots of very talented people worked on the game. You're amazing.
But just scene is just Neil.
But like, you see, common tropes in television and movies, you always use the religious character as the hypocrite, so that you can bash on them for easy laughs. Like, this is going to be Angela in The Office. And, to a degree, that's fair. That's a very common person that I'm familiar with, having lived in Utah my whole life. But I like it when you can show that there's also a person that can be faithful and can love people without hypocrisy. Those people also exist, even if they're not as easy to identify sometimes, or they're not the easiest to point your finger at. And so I love it when a story can be honest about that too, and can be respectful about it, even though this is one of the easier things to compartmentalize and be ignorant on if you're not in that same faction.
I feel like it's also an overarching thing in this game too, because we see people subvert your expectations of them a lot in The Last of Us Part 2 in particular, right? Like the fact that we inhabit Abby and we feel gross about it at the beginning of the game, that people are always subverting your expectations of them. We make a lot of assumptions about people, especially post-outbreak. And the way that they use the synagogue and that they talk about spirituality, all of that I think helps to serve your point, Shan, that people are much more complex than we give them credit for. And this game always subverting your expectations about those people as you learn about how complex they are and you grow to care about them more, that the more you know about someone, it's impossible to not have compassion for them, or at least be able to have compassion for their perspective. And so I think I love that. I just wanted to echo what you said.
Yeah. Okay, another location in Seattle, we find the music shop, which is, I think it's my favorite location. Just because music is the most powerful motif in this game for me. So Luke, we're going to have you talk the most about this section.
Everyone else shut up. It's Luke's turn.
So the only one who's allowed to talk about music.
No, but so we start this section with Ellie finding a guitar, only having to tune a single string, and she starts remembering Joel with Pearl Jam, and then she switches to recalling a moment with Dina where there was a fireside song where they had a memory where Ellie played Aha's Take on Me, and thank you everybody for just like giving me some background music. But I just wanted to say, please stop. All right. So while playing this song, I just felt like, so it's a different tone to take with this song than the original, obviously. And Take on Me has a very unique chord progression to it than traditional pop songs. And Luke, I don't know the chord progression, but I feel like it somehow parallels the emotional beat that Ellie is trying to portray in this scene. And I was wondering if you could help explain to me how it works that way, how like that elevating chord progression is working to hit that beat.
So it's interesting. I didn't know you were going to ask this, but what makes a lot of sense about this song, certainly the way that the chorus operates, is it's another way to subvert your expectations from a musical perspective, right? Like the chorus, it's like a typical pop song where you would have the 1-5 minor, and then you would expect them to do that again over and over again for the chorus. But they're able to they switch the chord to the minor on the second time, going up, but the melody's always rising up. So it's a way it's always rising. And it's a way to use like a pretty typical chord progression, but upping the melody each time and just changing one chord, like the G to the B minor instead of directly back to the E minor or to the 5. All of that is a way to subvert your expectations just enough to allow the melody to keep rising, because it feels like in that chorus, you can say the same words over and over again, that the stakes are getting progressively more important and higher. And the way that Ellie sings it is another way to take what I think is already a beautifully crafted song and subvert your expectations to another degree, because she does go up to that I'll be gone. She goes all the way up there and then takes it back down in a day or two, rather than what Aha does, which is go into the stratosphere, which is very exciting when Aha does it. But when Ellie does it, it grounds it. It grounds it in a way that, rather than taking you off into the stars, puts you in an almost melancholy is not even the right word, in a nostalgic moment, in a somber moment. Anyway, the song is, so go ahead, Shan.
Right, so it feels like, okay, so the original take, just, again, it keeps elevating till it floats at this high, and you think that's going to happen, and then she reminds you she's not there, and she's down here. So it's almost like emotionally telling you the story, like, I'm kind of hopeful, but I'm actually just beat down right now. And I feel like that's telling something about her character in this moment, like how she is with Dina, but being reminded that she's dealing with Joel's death at the same time.
So I have a maybe different thought on this. Not so much the chord progression, because I think Luke and Shan, you're spot on. But I was really excited to get to this point in the game. I knew it was coming. Played it before. This is one of my favorite moments when she starts singing "Take on Me." But after watching the television show, do you guys remember what Bill's code is? So
It's the 80s. Yeah, I was thinking the same
80s
thing.
music means disaster, which
Yeah.
I thought was really interesting. It could be intentional. I'm not sure, but just that adds another extra layer of
Definitely.
Ellie's in distress here. So I just love the choice of that, and that could be me reaching for symbolism, but it meant something to me, and I thought it was great.
I had that same thought, Tucker, right? Like, she's using the musical language she learned from Joel, and which Joel also used to communicate with Frank, to express that distress. I had that same thought, like, and that devastates me when I think about her. It's almost like a desperate cry for help, her playing this song right now. And it's interesting how long they dedicate to this song. Like, she doesn't just play the first couple chords, she plays the whole song. She goes through this whole thing with Dina watching. I just remembered the other thought I had about the chorus, Shan, because you asked about it. I think one other thing, it took me a second as I was thinking about it, that makes the chorus really exciting. So the typical pop progression goes 1, 5, 6 minor. Then we get a minor chord that takes us to the 2 minor again. But then the last time, the
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful, because it takes the 6, rather than the 6 minor taking us back to the 2 minor, it does the 6 dominant. It takes that D sharp, which adds one more flavor of leading tone to it. I think that's what you're feeling when you're like, it feels like it's constantly rising, but I don't know why. It's because the chord progression makes that one subtle difference, which does make it feel like it's rising. And so when Ellie goes up to that, it feels especially high and reachy, so that when she grounds it, it feels all the more devastating.
I know just enough to know that I know just enough to know that something's happening, but not know anything about it.
There's
and
definitely
so
some music going on. Yeah.
Something's happening.
Also,
something's happening now.
Like, shout out to the guitar interface, how when she's playing the Pearl Jam lick at the beginning, how it has lowercase letters for all the notes, because she's not playing those chords. She's using those notes on top of another pedal chord, or a couple of pedal chords, actually. And then when she's actually playing chords and the power chords, they go back to the uppercase letters, like for E major and F sharp major and all those other chords she plays. So that's just another attention to detail. The guitar interface I actually find to be pretty interesting.
But the guitar interface is something that I found really fun as well. Like, each playthrough, I've never really sat down and like tried to figure things out, but like I've seen a number of videos where people have like actually learned how to play different songs using the guitar, like, and the way that they've set it up. Like, it's just a cool mechanic that they didn't need to do, but they spent all that extra time building it out. And you can find countless videos of people, like, I don't know if any of you have seen it, but Mark Hoppus from Blink 182 actually has a video of him like streaming the game, and he plays "Damn It" on the guitar, like, so he'll go and find one and like strum the chord and start singing, and and he forgets the lyrics at one part, but like he plays his own song, and like just using the build that they have in there. And you can find other people that have done like Metallica covers and stuff like that, where and a lot of the comments are, people are like, this would have been easier for you to learn the actual guitar to play than just like using the controller. But like, the fact that they made it in such a way that, yeah, it's not super intuitive, but it's flexible enough for people to be able to spend all of that extra time and just like, sit down and spend hours and play actual music, is just incredible. Like, that's such a minor thing that goes such a long way in immersing you into that moment where it's like, okay, no, like I actually am playing the guitar at this point, doing, instead of, instead of just, okay, here's a button, I push it once and then it launches into this cutscene. It makes you strum, and you can sit down again afterwards and continue to kind of play around with it. It's just something that I think is so cool that they spent that time to say, well, we want the music to be this theme throughout. We need to find a way to make it extra immersive, and so we're going to build an entire guitar mechanic into this game.
It reminds me of when I was younger. People would come to school and they'd be like, "Hey, I just figured out how to play Smoke on the Water on my ocarina and Ocarina of Time," and it's like, I was like, "What? How?" Like,
Oh my gosh, I need to pull out my ocarina.
All right, Sad Dad Flash poll. Who cried at this scene? Any song?
Absolutely. I cried during Take On Me. I absolutely cried during
Me too.
Take On Me.
my
That
eyes
one got me.
moist.
When like in the remastered version, Dina, how they capture her reacting to Take On Me was just a little more nuanced. It was gorgeous.
So
Her eyes just really capture the moment.
Yeah, I felt a little cringy in this because I find it just one-on-one serenading, just cringy in itself. So that's all that was in my head. I'm glad you guys had an emotional moment. I wish I would have had that, but I just had pure cringe.
Mine
Well-
wasn't cringe per se, but like I didn't necessarily get like the emotional, but like I did notice this time through, I was very impressed with the performance and how real it felt because like. I mean, I guess, Tucker, you've probably never serenaded anybody like that because you find it cringe. But, like,
Not gonna lie.
anybody that's, like, tried to play a
go-to
song
move.
to, like, woo somebody, like, I felt it really relatable where it's, like, you feel really insecure, but you're trying to pretend that you're confident. And I saw so much of that in Ellie's performance, like, in the way that Ashley Johnson portrayed that, where you can see it interface them, like, just the little micro expressions. There's times where, she looks more
She gets
confident.
embarrassed.
Yeah, she does. And like there's times where she's a little bit more timid, but then there's times where she maintains the eye contact and her voice gets a little bit stronger, where it's like, okay, I'm crushing this right now. But then she's kind of like she does get that embarrassed, she withdraws a little bit, and you see that those ebbs and flows through the performance. And I thought it was brilliant.
It's brilliant.
Okay.
It's a scary, vulnerable thing. Yeah.
Another flash poll. Actually, I think I already know the answer. Everybody here has serenaded somebody except Tucker, right?
What? Never.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Raise hand.
I
Once or
failed
twice.
at it. I think I've done it 2-3 times. Failed miserably.
You don't have
Luke's
to do
done
it
it in
well.
front of people.
Yeah.
And Shannon both serenaded me. Does that count?
Yeah.
I've been on the
That's Luke's-
receiving. I've been the serenadee.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
The serenaded.
I think that's why it worked for us and not for Tucker.
That's it.
It reminds me of Ken in the Barbie movie where he's like, "You want to sit there while I play the guitar at you?"
That was very real for me.
And it's like 12 hours later and he's still singing, "I want to push you around. Well, I will."
Well, I will.
Okay, so we've talked about the bank and the synagogue and the music store. Now, I hope I'm not reaching here, but what do you think all of these locations thematically have to do or have in common with each other in terms of the whole game's story and theme?
Well, I think everywhere we visit in this game has some has multiple layers of symbolism, right? Like where society is now and the way you treat these spaces post outbreak is completely different in some cases, with the exception of a few notable places. The synagogue being one, and we just had that whole conversation of, even though the synagogue isn't full of people in there worshiping, it's still a very special place in a way. It's still a very spiritual place. The bank is interesting because, it used to be the cradle of where you kept all of your money, and now it's...
All right, so I'm going to interject here.
Okay,
you don't
fine.
have to talk just to talk.
I'm not talking just to talk. Wow.
Rude.
So this...
I was personally very enraptured by what Luke had
All
to
right.
say, Shan.
Okay,
So this
Shan,
might-
if you want to answer your own question, just
No,
do
no,
it.
no.
And don't ask
No.
my opinion.
Yeah, don't ask, just say it.
This might be wrong, but this was the epiphany I had this time, and I personally felt comfortable with it. But it felt like thematically, what's important in this game is learning what brings us together and what divides us. And the bank, it's money. And the synagogue, it's religion. And for the music shop, it's music. And later, when we're in the school, we see Halloween. So, and they talk about culture, they talk about tradition. So I think throughout all of these places in Seattle Day One, we're seeing a lot of instances of reasons that we bring ourselves together and reasons that we separate ourselves from each other. And it's very important, as we see in Abby's story later, that we have to, again, do the work to learn about each other, even if we're not in those same groups, right? Because the Seraphites is a religious group that Abby has nothing to do with. And so it's easy for her to compartmentalize them as, say, we might with Scientology, right? We just say, oh, those guys are weirdos. Well, guess what? We are in Utah. We are
I'm not in
or
Utah.
have at some point belonged to the LDS church, and people see us as weirdos. It's all perspective. And we all like separate ourselves and and we use it to bring ourselves together in our own community, but we also use it to divide ourselves between communities. And so I honestly believe that a lot of these things are just trying to remind us that there are these symbols of division. And I think that's why in the bank, we specifically have a bank heist, because it was...
Heist is a strong word. Yeah.
It was a symbolic moment.
It's pre-botched, yeah.
It was a symbolic moment of
Attempted
division
heist.
between people that needed money and people who had too much money. And in the synagogue, we see an example of people being brought together by religion and what that did for them. And so anyway, that's my personal belief, is that that's what they're trying to tell us with this story, is how to come together by putting ourselves in these perspectives and communities.
I think that goes along pretty well with what I think is the main theme of the game, is seeing things through different perspectives. And we're going to touch on that a lot at about the halfway point of the game, I think. But I would agree with that. I think that viewing the same situation through a different set of eyes is a huge theme in this game.
Maybe I have a more nihilist view of this game's theme, but for me, it's all about the dangers of tribalism. And so kind of the shadow side of the bringing together, because there's these groups, they come together because they have a common purpose, but they are also fighting other groups that came together with a common purpose. It's about this whole thing.
Well, so you only took the worst parts of what divide us, but again, like the music brings us together, right? And the religion can bring us together.
Not if you hate pop.
So Tucker was divided on Take on Me.
No, I actually loved it. I guess the point I'm making is, for me, this game served more as the theme of the game was more of a warning than I guess, come together, which I think is just very interesting. Even though the theme is essentially the same about division and coming together, my brain, my thought went more to the dangers of dividing versus the benefits of coming together.
Well, don't we learn, though, that the panacea to the cycle of vengeance is learning each other's perspective? So even though there's a lot of nihilism in the tribalism, we see that you can inoculate yourself by going through the process. And so, yes, you can learn the worst parts of it, but it ends on an optimistic note, that that's the only way that you can break the cycle of hatred and destruction.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just thought it was interesting. Just my take on it was more of the shadow side of it, which, playing forward now, I'm gonna maybe take a little bit of a different view and focus on the positive side to see if I get a little bit something different out of the game theme this playthrough versus my last playthrough.
Okay. So moving on, in Seattle, we also see that the Wolves had set up a shop in in a pet store. Now, I think this was more ironic. They they were just, because where's the last place you're going to find a bunch of wolves is in a domestic pet store. So I think that was just tongue in cheek. We also see a courthouse. I don't know that this is necessarily tied into the previous theme so much as we're also digging into criminal justice and what it looks like when there is no laws and no justice system. So I think that's why they included a court. I get a lot of anxiety going into the courthouse. I think that place is butts. Being bombarded as soon as you fall down the elevator shaft. You don't have an opportunity for stealth. They just bum rush you. Don't find that very
I remember
fair.
getting to that point and feeling pretty confident in work because I'm like picking everywhere clean. I'm like, I've got tons of ammo. I've got lots of like, supplies, and I'm good to go. And then that happens, and I'm like, well, there goes all my ammo and all my supplies, and I'm back to square one. Like, I think the game does a good job of right when you're about like, I'm feeling good, I could take on anything, and then the game's like, but no, you can't. And then all your supplies, you just get knocked right back down to square one.
Every time I play through these games, it's kind of a wonder to me that I like ever do replay them, because like A, the scary thing, but also B, like because of just that and how I just hate that. Like the fact that I play through these games and it's just a constant repeating cycle of I hate this part. I hate this part. I hate this part. And just, like, and the courthouse is that for me. Like, I got to this point and I did everything else first because I just hate the courthouse so much, and went through and still did that because it sucks. I hate it so much. But I do think that it's great in the way that it symbolizes kind of where Seattle is at, where the world's at as a whole as well. But like, you look at a courthouse and you think, okay, this is kind of, this is the foundation of society as we have it right now. Like, society works and operates on the foundation of law. Go in at that first, entry point, and we're in the courtroom, and there's the infected everywhere. Kind of that initial level, you just see infected, and that's the initial outbreak that took over society. But then you go down some stairs, and usually things like this, games when you go down, or movies, when there's a shot descending, like it's taking you down the next layer. Like this is what's on the surface. The infected is, the cordyceps are what's on the surface, but now we're descending and we're seeing what lies underneath that. And in that bailiff's office, we see, that there were Fedra officers that were executed against the wall. We see the commander that has the machete through him, and there's the note in there that, kind of talks a little bit more about this. And we do see that this area has splintered into tribalism. We see that the wolves have risen up and have driven Fedra out. And Fedra's like, all right, we're washing our hands, we're done. And we even see that our first glimpse in one of those notes that there is that religious fanatic group that we later learn are the Seraphites. And so we see that it's not just the WLF and it's not just Fedra. There's another splinter group here, but we see humanity has started to become tribal. And that's more, that's on a lower level, and it's darker, and it's, just kind of a more, I don't know the right word, but it's, that's more the underlying problem here, is it's not the infection. That's what we see, and that's what drove everybody here, but it's our base nature that drives us to primalism, or to tribalism, that caused these rifts. Like the infection was just the catalyst. The outbreak was the catalyst that allowed people to revert to their base nature. And then we go down even further, and we just end up in hell for a couple of minutes while we just fight infected running at you. It just sucks, and I hate that part so much.
Is it the show where Joel talks about that he not worried about the infected, that he's more worried about humans?
Bill mentions that in the first game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking in the show when they're like parked out in the forest, and yeah, they're just way off the road. Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but I just love that recurring theme of, yeah, the infected's not the real danger, it's humankind.
Yeah, that's a common theme in Stephen King novels as well, is the monsters aren't the monsters, it's the humans. Also, to Lundy's point, since you brought up the machete, have they ever given you a machete in either game without giving you a murder scene where it's embedded in somebody's chest? I can't think
That's
of
the
one.
only place you get machetes. They grow out of the chests once people die, and
you
then
don't
machetes
just
grow
drop
out
a
of them.
machete.
Yeah.
You have to die with a machete to have it be available, or else somebody else is keeping it.
I just love that the dedication to the craft. It's like,
Remind
okay,
me-
let's spend thousands of dollars for these 5 developers to run off and craft a murder scene for a week.
Exactly.
Could use some money.
Is this where we're introduced to Shamblers, or is that the school? I'm trying to remember.
It's later.
That's later.
That's after the school. That's the next episode. Spoiler alert. Yeah.
I can't wait to talk about Shamblers. And
They're the worst.
Yeah, them being the worst enemy type in any video game.
All right, so after exiting the courthouse, we finally have what we need to go to the Fuck Fedra gate. I got to say it. So, all right, so when we get there, we get to see that the cordyceps, the infected, are capable of parkour, and they can jump over fences.
Parkour.
My favorite way that has
Parkour.
ever been phrased. The infected are capable of parkour.
We didn't know this until
Parkour.
now, right?
Yeah.
We've never seen this. It's important world building that they add it here. And when we enter the hotel, we find that we find complete devastation of the wolves that was this where a bunch of wolves had been, and the wolves that had killed Joel were on their way back to their encampment, and they were just stopping there on the way. Do we know officially what was happening there?
Don't we find one of Abby's crew dead here?
Yeah, so I think that they were on their way back to their encampment, and this was like a location where they had some of their people already, and that's why
Like
there
a
were more of
checkpoint
them
or something.
Yeah,
The Saravina base, yeah. They were grabbing things
Exactly.
as they were kind of. We learn a little bit later, why they're kind of centralizing all of their resources. But
They
it
can
looks
make
like
more
this
burritos.
is part of
That's right.
part of that pullback, I think.
Right, that'll be fun when we get there. But we see that a bunch of wolves are dead, and we have a short aside with Ellie and Dina, where Ellie hopes that Abby isn't dead, and Dina says, well, at least they'll be dead, and Ellie says that wouldn't be justice. Now, I was curious where everybody lands on this issue, if you think it's justice if Abby's dead, or if it's important who gets to pull the trigger.
Well, I think I like that conversation because it shows the difference in their priorities. To me, it seems like Dina wants justice, and justice is this person is dead for what they did. And Ellie wants revenge. And revenge is I get to kill this person for what they did. And they're similar, but different things.
Yeah, Ellie wants the kill for herself because revenge is about yourself. Like, she wants to gratify her need to kill. Whereas for Dina, like we talked about, she didn't get to get revenge on her sister's killers. But so for her, there's no real, like, revenge, but justice for her is just making Abby being dead, is maybe the way she sees it, because she doesn't get to kill the people who killed her sister. What difference does it make to Dina?
I think it's an interesting question because it makes us question, like, what is the purpose of punishment and how it serves justice, right? Like, because punishment may or may not be justice itself. I think, to Ellie's point, she's mentioning that it better not have been an infected. I think had she gone up, she sees, we learn a little bit later, there's some of them that have been killed by Tommy. And I think that if she had gone up and it's just like, oh, here's everybody that killed Joel and Tommy killed them, like, I think that Ellie may have been satisfied with that. But I think the reason that she might be upset, she might not know how to verbalize this, but like kind of the underlying reason for why it's like, no, better not be an infected, is that's essentially like dying of natural causes before you stand trial. Like, the end result is the same. The punishment is death, but accountability was never held. And so it's they need to be held accountable for what they've done. They need to die knowing why they're dying, not just, dying like, oh, well, today my luck ran out, but they need to know that they're being held accountable. And I think that's part of Ellie's motivation as well, because if either her or Tommy, somebody with that connection to Joel, got to be there and be like, I am the one that is killing you. You know, as you die, that I held you accountable for what you did. That rings different than whether they were killed by an infected or whether they died by a heart attack or something else, where that the thought of what they did is not on their mind when they die. And that, I think, is part of her motivation, is that, justice needs to be served because they need to be held accountable.
I really like the idea that in this world, dying of natural causes is getting killed by infected, because that's sort of what it is. And like earlier in the game, Ellie and Dina are talking about what's his name? Eugene? Is that his name? They're talking about how Eugene died of old age and how rare that is. And so I think that, to Lundy's point, that getting killed by an infected in this world is sort of just like dying of natural causes. That's how most people die.
Really bad athlete's foot.
Right.
I don't really know what that means, but sure.
Athlete's foot is a fungal infection.
Well,
It's just like the
okay.
Dickens.
Yeah.
Reaching.
Reaching.
So they don't really get into this, but I think Ellie also wants to extract a pound of flesh for what happened to Joel. And so a bullet to the head, if that is what she finds when she comes into... If she were to find Abby and she were just dead, like, a death for a death isn't equal because she also tortured Joel. She doesn't really get at that when she alludes to it not being justice, but justice to her is she wants to torture her. She has something darker in mind. And so, yeah, I think it... And it also... It might matter who gets the final say on exacting the punishment. Because in the criminal justice system as we have it now, a person has to stand trial against their accuser. So there is an accountability that is held against the person that was the victim. And if there's, as Lundy was saying, if you never face the person that you victimized, then how is that justice? That might be a part of it.
Yeah, it's the whole reason Abby was the one to torture Joel and the one to kill Joel. Joel was Abby's to ruin.
Except for Joel didn't torture Abby's dad, unless of course you were a Joel controlled by Shan. Yeah.
I mean, 85 rounds in the genitals could be considered torture.
Exactly. She earned what she got in my version. So we end up finding out that okay, so I love this scene, right? You make your way through the hotel and you open this door and it's just washed in red because of the curtains in this area, and you're just like immediately consumed by dread. And you find out that Tommy has already been here, and you know this because they have laid out this dynamic that you find out from part 1. Tommy and Joel used to torture people to extract information, and Tommy has done the same thing, which means that Tommy is all the way back into the mindset that he was when he was with Joel in the 20-year interim period.
It does seem an effective interrogation technique, I will have to say. It works. Yeah, 100% of the time. Well, I love the detail here, though, where us as the player knows what happens in part 1, but Ellie explains it to Dina because Joel explained it to her. Because Ellie obviously wasn't there. Ellie was off with David at that point in the first game. So to me, it was really interesting imagining that conversation. How does that come up organically between Joel and Ellie? Like, it's not, hey, remember this one time when...
How did you know where to find me? I bet it was something like that. Like afterwards when they're leaving, it's like, Joel, how did you know where to find me? And Joel's like, well, I kneecapped this dude with a knife, and then I told his friend to point to a map. You get it. Like,
yeah.
Do we ever get between both games a single pure demonstration of how this works? Or is it always subverted? Because in this one, it's already played out. In the first one, Joel says, I want you to point, and then he just kills the second person. So we've never even seen it demonstrated perfectly. And so, because like in the first game, you can already see, okay, I know where he's going with this. This is going to be very effective. This is pretty cool. And then you find out, oh, he's a badass. He just kills the second person. And that like cements like this person knows how to read people, and it informs his character better than just following out the scene as you expected it to after they set up the expectation for how it should have played out. Very effective, but they never show the sequence in its purest form as they probably played it out 100 times in that 20-year period. And I love that as far as writing goes.
Yeah, I think this scene is really awesome. You mentioned the red curtain and the light coming in. I love as you're kind of slowly going up, like higher up in this building, and you keep finding bodies and they keep commenting on how it's like, yeah, an infected didn't do this. And so there's this trail of chaos and you're following a massacre basically. And it just made me think of like, this is Joel's brother. It stands to reason that like the same kind of force that Joel was in the first game is pretty similar to what Tommy could be in this game. And I mean, it reminded me of at the end of the first game when you go through and you kill those fireflies to get to Ellie. It's like, what would that look like to someone who came there, a few hours later and just like walked down those same halls and was like, oh man, there are so many dead people here. And that's the vibe that I got playing as Ellie, going through this area, just like look around and be like, oh man, he did a number on these people. They did not see him coming. And then when you go into that room and the light shining through those red curtains, you're just washed in red. And what you said, that you just immediately feel the sense of dread, is almost verbatim what I wrote down in my notes, that it like, you go into this room and it just sinks into your heart, that you're like, whoa, this is like some heavy stuff for Tommy to be doing. He's very clearly in not a great space and really, really ready to just kind of do anything to reach his goal. And you kind of see a little bit of Joel in Tommy in that moment.
You've never seen him this way. I sent around a meme. I hope it was as funny to everyone else as it was to me, but it reminds me of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining with Danny Torrance, when he has that he has the finger, right? And he's like,
Davy?
red
Is that
rum,
it?
red rum. What?
It's Davy? Is it Davy? His finger?
No, is it Davy the Shining in his finger, or like the creature? Anyway,
I think it's Davy, right?
It might be. But he talks to his finger, and it's like this creepy little thing, this little boy, Danny. And so I imagine Tommy like this, like he's in this like dark, psychotic mental state where he's like the voices are talking to him, and he's going on a murder spree because like this voice inside of his finger is telling him to.
That's also
probably exactly what happened. Yeah.
Red rum.
Fun fact, that's also the plot of Muppet Treasure Island, because Fozzie Bear
to Mr.
has...
Thimble.
Yeah. No, he lives in my finger.
Same thought.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen The Shining.
The shot-for-shot remake of Muppet Treasure Island.
Oh, it's Tony.
Thanks to make it more relatable. It's Mr. Thimble, the man who lives in my finger.
Oh, the big blue wet thing!
He's been to the moon twice.
Man, I haven't thought about Muppet Treasure Island in like 20 years. I'm going to go watch that today.
It's the
All right,
best Muppet
so
movie.
we danced around it earlier. As far as criminal justice is concerned, is it important who gets to extract the pound of flesh? But in that same vein, who deserves the kill more? Is it Tommy or is it Ellie? All right, so I'm going to make a tangent tirade right here. I've had this conversation many times with many of you over the years, but the Lord of the Rings, who kills the Witch King of Angmar?
I know the answer to this because I did a deep dive on it. Do you just want me to answer it?
Go for
Any
it.
takers?
Mary is the one that kills the Witch King. The dagger has poison, which I guess it's a team effort. Has a dagger which is poison, which allows him to become mortal and kill.
Yeah.
And
Eowyn
It's an alley-oop situation.
It is. It's a team effort. Eowyn's the one that kills him, but the Morgul blade does play a part.
Eowyn's the
barrow
one
blade,
who
the barrow blade.
stabs him through the face. That
All
does
right.
the deed.
All right. Does Eowyn deserve the kill?
No, because of her terrible singing.
Okay.
Oh,
Here's
How dare you?
here's my defense of this, because I know that this is debated, and Elvish tattoo. I feel like I have a little bit of
That's not dark speak.
No,
It's
it's
not the
dark.
black speech of Mordor.
It's Sindarin. This is Sindarin. It's not like as high as Quenya,
Okay.
but it's Sindarin. This is common
It's
speech for
mid-Elvish.
elves, I guess.
Yeah.
But a lot of people try to say, well, the no man can kill me. It's more of a race thing. He's a hobbit. I think that people are looking a little Tolkien also wrote "speak, friend, and enter." It's very literal, right? They use melon.
Melon.
Yeah, the Elvish word for friend. I do think that it's him. So Tolkien also had a hate for Shakespeare. He did not like Shakespeare at all, and he hated a couple of things about some of the plays. That's partially why he included Ents in there. Is I forget which play it is, but they talk about trees moving, and then it ends up being not that. And Tolkien was like, "Well, that's dumb. It should have been trees," and so he makes Ents.
I'm gonna make all the trees move.
But in Macbeth, it's there's the prophecy no man born of woman will kill, and it's well, this person was a cesarean section, and that's what it allows. And he was like, that's still kind of a cop out. That's dumb. And so he wanted it to be similar, and so it's Eowyn that gets the kill. She couldn't have done it alone because there is the barrow blade that was specifically crafted for this purpose. So it's a team effort. She gets credit for the kill because she is the one that deserved, or that she's the one that fulfilled the prophecy no man could kill. She's a woman, and she delivered it. But Mary gets the assist. It's like Eric said, alley-oop. He threw the ball up. She dunked it. Game over.
I did a sports analogy, you guys.
You did
it.
I think Aragorn should have been him. The Witch King of Angmar wiped out most of his people.
All of his people.
Yeah. And so I feel
this
like
is why we
been
contest
him.
it.
Yeah.
So,
but I
story-wise,
get the prophecy fulfilling.
Right. So this is why we've contested it for the last 20 years since the movie was released. Not the last 20 years. Since we looked on Lord of the Rings wiki and discovered that the Witch King of Angmar had wiped out all of Aragorn's people, story-wise, mechanically, that would have satisfied his character more than it would have satisfied Eowyn. For her, it was just this moment for her to prove herself temporarily, to satisfy this angst she had, in this
he
few
hurt
chapters.
Her uncle. The Witch King of Angmar hurt her uncle.
Whereas Aragorn is an empty vessel because all of his people are dead. How does he not get this kill?
Because he can fulfill his destiny and duty without it.
So he still needs the emptiness.
No, so he's going to reclaim his throne, as the King of Gondor. He doesn't need to kill the Witch King in order to do that, and he's doing that in the books. He's doing that because he needs to reclaim it in order to be able to marry Arwen. The movies make him a little bit more of a reluctant Messiah character, which I believe is a little bit more compelling. But for her character arc, she can't be, her whole thing is I am just as good, the women in this country can still die upon swords even if they're not carrying them, right? She wants to fight. She wants to defend her people, defend her country. And without her killing the biggest badass on the battlefield, she doesn't ever really solidify that, yes, I am that good, I am that level, I am capable. And so by her getting that kill, that fulfills her character. Aragorn fulfills his character without that. He doesn't need to be a part of that battle. He doesn't, he's still able to come and fulfill his destiny, fulfill prophecy, reunite the southern kingdom of Gondor with the northern kingdom of Arnor, and become the king over all of the free men in Middle-earth. He's able to still rise and be his maximum potential fulfilled without having to even fight the Witch King. They don't ever have encounter each other past Weathertop.
All right, so I'm actually lightly persuaded. That was compelling. But I want to bring this back
Only
to The
lightly
Last of
persuaded.
Us. No, I actually am. I've been like adamant
that's a big win for Shan, Lundy. He's not easily persuaded. Yeah.
Can I point out the double standard here for men and women in Middle Earth? Women have to be perfect, have to kill the biggest badass to even be considered, even though she's killed probably hundreds of orcs at this point. But, any man, let's take her uncle, he just, rides, swinging his sword around a little bit, leads a charge, and dies pitifully by just getting hit in the shield like a pansy. But all of a sudden, he's still a hero. Double standard in the token world.
We'll save this for a different discussion, but man, I have a lot of that fires me. Oh, no.
So many thoughts. Like I said, this is definitely another discussion. I have more to add.
Yeah, this is for a hot take. But
yeah.
Please, let's bring us back to The Last of Us. So, anyway, I wanted to just harp on which character is most satisfied by killing Abby. Would it be Tommy or would it be Ellie? Mechanically, driven by what has happened up until this moment in the story, who deserves it?
I personally think Ellie deserves it because of that father-daughter relationship. I can't really speak because I don't have any siblings, but what I've observed is people with their siblings, sometimes there's not a lot of love lost in estranged sibling relationships. And everybody with siblings, feel free to correct me here. But I think that bond, that father-daughter bond, is a lot more intense than a sibling bond. Tommy and Joel had been separate for years and have been seemingly okay. They've been able to move on with their lives. But Joel, we saw with Sarah, wasn't able to move on because that father-daughter connection was broken. Ellie fills that father-daughter connection, so I think when it's broken from the other half, so Ellie losing Joel, there's a bigger void in her life, and she deserves that kill.
Okay, so deserve or should? Should Tommy or should Ellie? Because I'd argue that Tommy should be the one, because Joel killed all of the Fireflies to save Ellie, to protect her innocence and give her potential for future, right? That moment that was promised to her at the end of The Last of Us, when she found the giraffes, and that showed him that there was still a future for her, that there was still humanity inside of her. That was a promise to him that there was still something left, and that has to be fulfilled. Now, if Ellie goes out on this path of vengeance and kills people similar to what the path that Joel went down for 20 years, that would break and destroy that part of her forever in a way that it almost, well, it could, right? In a way that it almost did for him. And so I think that Tommy needs to be a proxy for carrying out this vengeance or justice on Ellie's behalf, because he owes Joel for his survival in those 20 years, and he also needs to protect Ellie's innocence.
I'd say that I agree with that. I think that I don't know how to put it any differently than you did, but I think that Tommy does have kind of a responsibility from Joel, and I think that Ellie going out and killing Abby and all of these people going on a revenge thing is not what Joel would want. I don't think that Joel would want anyone to go after him. He'd be like, don't bother, it's fine, but especially not Ellie.
Yeah, it's something that I hadn't considered before, but, this is now your turn for persuading me, because I would have thought, before you had explained that, it's like, well, yeah, it clearly needs to be Ellie, but hearing it put that way, it's like, actually, no, yeah, I think I agree with you that, it should be Tommy.
It's whoever gets there first. It's a race.
And yeah,
it's like Rat Race.
Yeah,
it's Rat Race.
Just like that, indistinguishable.
Shot for shot remake.
Yeah.
Rowan Atkinson makes an appearance.
My gosh, can we get a remake of The Last of Us with Rowan Atkinson as the main character? That is all I want in the world.
HBO, if you're listening, cast him.
Yeah, just start it over. Pedro Pascal is great, but he's no Mr. Bean. Let's try it again.
Up until we started having these prolonged conversations where it's almost like hour for hour how long the games are, I was overly dismissive of secondary characters as just like utilities to
Fodder.
extend the to just ancillary characters to make the story continue.
Exposition machines.
Yeah. And now that we're really getting into character analysis and story analysis, I feel like I understand them in a way that prevents me from dismissing them. And this is the first time I've felt like I've really been compassionate and empathetic towards Tommy as a human person, as a character. And I feel like it's going to give me a completely different perspective on what he adds to the story, because that take that I gave you about Tommy needing to do this to protect Ellie's innocence, I actually just had that epiphany last night. I've never considered it, and I've played, the first one 5 times. I've played this one 4 times. Just barely considered it now, and I love that having these big conversations is giving me new perspective.
I also love that and agree wholeheartedly. I am having a great time on these, like, just chatting about these games and taking it slow and soaking it in and trying to find details that I would have glossed over before. It's a different way to play games. It's super fulfilling. I really enjoy it.
Also, we're kind of living the theme of the game. We are learning other perspectives and changing views and breaking the cycle of revenge murder.
All right, who's taking the outro?
I don't think I'm going to go and murder.
So next time on the Sad Dad Games podcast, we will be talking about the second half of The Last of Us Part 2, Seattle Day 1. And we would like to thank you for joining us today. Remember that you can find our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss our new episodes. Our new episodes of our regular series drop every Monday, and new episodes of Eric's Indie Corner drop every Thursday. If you're listening on YouTube, remember to give our videos a thumbs up and leave us a comment if they're positive. We only approve of good vibes around here.
We do not do well with criticism.
We are
we're all very sensitive. We're all very sensitive hearts. Be nice to us. Yeah.
Yeah, we want a very insulated community here.
We're all about exclusion.
All right. Well, thank you for taking way too much of your time with us this week, and we hope that you join us again next. Outro noise.
Outro noise. Play the thing.
Outro. Bleep-a-doof, bleep-a-deep, bloopity-blow.